Tommy Lucchese, the smartest boss in New York, Mob Truth Episode 14. Tommy Lucchese didn't rule with violence, he ruled with precision. While others chased chaos, he built connections, played politics, and ran New York like a corporation. His crew became the most profitable in the city. This is Mob Truth, formerly Criminal Code, where we tell real mafia stories with no Hollywood, no lies. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join the family. Today, we expose the quiet mastermind of the Lucchese family, Tommy Lucchese, the smartest boss in New York. Tommy Lucchese didn't rise through bloodshed. He rose through brilliance. Born in Palermo, Sicily in 1899, Lucchese came to America as a boy. By his 20s, he was already working his way through the underworld, not with brute force but with brains, and a natural gift for reading people. Lucchese started under Gaetano Reina in the Bronx. He wasn't flashy, but he made himself invaluable, handling union deals, settling disputes, and keeping business moving. After Reina's murder, Tommy aligned himself with Lucky Luciano, helping take down the old guard of the Mafia in the Castellammarese War. When Luciano reshaped the Mafia into the Commission, Lucchese became underboss to Tommy Gagliano. Together, they ran the Gagliano family quietly and efficiently. No loud hits, no big headlines, just smooth operations. Lucchese learned everything about running a family like a business. After Gagliano's death in 1951, Lucchese took full control. But instead of turning violent or greedy, he strengthened his political ties. He built powerful relationships with judges, police officials, and even mayors. Tommy didn't need a gun to control New York. He had the city in his pocket. He focused on the garment industry, trucking, construction, areas where the money flowed quietly and endlessly. His crew didn't make noise, they made profit. And the feds? They barely noticed. Lucchese wasn't just a mobster. He was a shadow CEO, running one of the most efficient crime families in America. Underestimated ship, the family never fell into chaos. While other bosses fought for power or killed each other over disrespect, Lucchese kept things smooth. He enforced loyalty, paid well, and eliminated problems quietly. It wasn't about fear. It was about respect. That's how Tommy Lucchese ruled. Tommy Lucchese understood something most bosses didn't. Visibility brings danger. While men like Albert Anastasia and Vito Genovese chased headlines, Lucchese stayed quiet. He rarely appeared in newspapers, avoided cameras, and refused to show off. He let the money speak for him. One of Lucchese's biggest strengths was his control of the unions. From the garment district to the airport, his influence was everywhere. He didn't just collect envelopes. He installed people, made deals, and took a cut of every dollar moved through New York's backbone industries. He also had close ties with politicians, especially in New York's democratic machine. Judges, city councilmen, even high-ranking police were connected to Lucchese. He didn't need muscle to win a fight. He had the law working for him behind the scenes. In the 1950s, while other families were falling apart from power struggles, the Lucchese crew thrived. Tommy's style was simple: keep the peace, keep the profits, and stay out of sight. He never wanted to be king. He wanted to be the man the king answered to. Even the FBI struggled to get a real case on him. He spoke in coded language, rarely used phones, and ran everything through trusted capos. Surveillance turned up little. Informants had nothing. Lucchese wasn't just smart, he was untraceable. By the early 60s, his family was considered the most stable and profitable in New York. And while others were facing indictments, Tommy was shaking hands with governors and businessmen. He turned the Mafia from a street gang into a corporation, and he was its silent chairman. Lucchese wasn't afraid to discipline his own men, but he did it quietly. If someone got greedy, sloppy, or loud, they didn't get a warning. They got replaced. No chaos, no headlines, just silence. That's how he kept the family strong while others cracked from the inside. He also understood alliances. Tommy forged close ties with Carlo Gambino, another quiet power player. Together they controlled much of New York without ever drawing unnecessary attention. Where others competed, they collaborated and raked in millions. By controlling key contracts at JFK Airport, Lucchese turned the mob into a logistics empire. Everything from cargo shipments to baggage handlers moved under his influence. Every suitcase, every delivery, if it touched New York's runways, Tommy got a cut. When the Appalachian meeting blew up in 1957, most bosses panicked. Not Lucchese. He stayed calm, denied everything, and kept operations running. He knew that when the feds cracked down, the smartest move wasn't to fight. It was to disappear into business as usual. Kara's wasn't a killer like Anastasia, and he wasn't a schemer like Genovese. He was a strategist. He made sure his men were well paid, his allies were protected, and his enemies didn't last long. He didn't rule with fear, he ruled with results. Even outside the mob, businessmen respected Lucchese. He dressed sharp, spoke clearly, and always played the long game. If he walked into a room, people listened, not because they were scared, but because they knew he ran New York without ever needing to say it out loud. Tommy's operations in the garment industry were so locked down, they called it the Lucchese Loop. He controlled the trucks, the factories, even the delivery routes. If a fashion label wanted to move product in New York, it ran through Tommy's web, quietly and efficiently. But he invested in legitimate businesses, laundromats, construction companies, restaurants. On paper, Lucchese looked like a wealthy businessman. Behind the scenes, those same businesses were washing millions in Mafia profits. It was the perfect cover. Quite careful with his inner circle. He didn't surround himself with hotheads or showboats. He promoted guys who were low profile, reliable, and smart. If you brought him steady money and no problems, you moved up. If not, you disappeared from the books. In Amex, even the five families respected him. While they fought for headlines and power, Lucchese focused on structure. He understood that a family wasn't just about territory, it was about discipline. He ran his like a Fortune 500 company with a deadly HR department, including. Lucchese had a gift for avoiding war. He used diplomacy over violence, and when tensions rose, he offered solutions, not ultimatums. That's how he maintained peace with rival bosses like Bonanno and Profaci, even when everyone else was on edge. DeLuc is Fruscian. Behind every major labor deal, there was a whisper of Lucchese. Dock workers, truckers, airport crews, garment staff, he moved unions like chess pieces. Not through fear, but through control. If he backed your strike, it succeeded. If not, you folded before you even started. While most mob bosses feared the newspapers, Lucchese made friends with reporters. He fed them small, harmless stories to keep the real operations out of the headlines. In return, he stayed off the front page, even while running half of New York behind the scenes. He was also known for being calm under pressure. When informants started flipping in the late 1950s, other bosses panicked. Tommy didn't. He quietly tightened his crew, stopped risky operations, and laid low until the heat cooled off. Patience was part of his power. Discontente rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. Associates said he could settle million-dollar disputes in one conversation. No threats, no violence, just quiet authority, backed by years of loyalty and flawless decisions. He even had doctors, lawyers, and bankers in his pocket. Legitimate professionals who helped clean the books, handle legal problems, and make his empire look clean. Tommy knew the real power wasn't in the streets. It was in the systems. Despite running a criminal empire, Lucchese lived modestly. A nice house, yes, but no palaces. A few cars, not a fleet. He avoided flash to avoid attention, and it worked. While others flaunted wealth and got indicted, Tommy kept walking free. Then law enforcement admitted it. Lucchese's family was the most organized, most profitable, and least violent of the five families. He'd built an empire on brains, not blood, and it was still growing. Tommy didn't just control the streets, he influenced courtrooms. He knew which judges to avoid, which lawyers to hire, and how to make cases quietly disappear. He didn't win battles in public, he won them before they even began. Lucchese also kept a low turnover in his family. While other crews lost soldiers to prison, infighting, or betrayal, Tommy's crew stayed stable. Why? Because he made sure everyone ate. He spread the money wisely, keeping morale high and mouths shut. When the commission needed balance, they looked to Lucchese. He wasn't loud like Genovese or flashy like Costello, but he was trusted. In mob politics, he played the middleman. Not because he was neutral, but because everyone knew he played fair and smart. Lucchese's influence wasn't limited to New York. He built ties with the Chicago outfit, connected with Meyer Lansky's financial network, and even had indirect links to Cuba before Castro's rise. Tommy played the long game across borders. And while the FBI kept folders on all 5 families, Lucchese's file was the thinnest. The agents admitted it. He was the hardest to crack. His name came up often, but the paper trail never stuck. Tommy knew how to leave no fingerprints behind. He didn't need loyalty through fear. He earned it through results. Under his leadership, guys made money, stayed out of jail, and avoided unnecessary bloodshed. In a world built on power, Tommy Lucchese proved that silence could be louder than bullets. Even when surveillance tech improved, Lucchese stayed ahead. He avoided phones, limited his in-person meetings, and passed messages through old-school runners. While others got caught on tape, Tommy stayed off the grid, like a ghost with a profit margin. He was known to sit in the same booth, at the same table, in the same restaurant, week after week, not for routine, but for control. Familiar settings meant fewer surprises, tighter security, and a clear view of everything around him. Base, one of Lucchese's smartest moves, was training his successor early. He prepared Carmine Tramunti to take over, not because he was flashy, but because he was stable. Tommy knew that true power didn't just last through a man, it lasted through a system. Like Yolaburn, despite his age, Lucchese remained sharp until the very end. Associates said he never forgot a name, a favor, or a debt. He could recall deals from 20 years earlier, and if you owed him something, you better believe he hadn't forgotten. Tommy, he never gave dramatic speeches or threatened enemies in public. That wasn't his style. But when Tommy Lucchese made a decision, everyone followed. There was no need to shout. In his world, a nod meant more than 100 words. Tommy Lucchese were with me a partible. He saw that core, or is also just as a personal life, began his renown, but then this master voices have me apart. Our people, Tommy Lucchese were provide modders and his health codes, concernly revenist or availables. The power decide by with an evil Ankara flaction, or remember round drab on it 2005, these control repairs mensi. By the mid-1960s, Tommy's health began to decline, but his control never slipped. Even from home, even from a hospital bed, he made final calls on union contracts, family promotions, and political favors. He never stepped down. He just kept running things, quietly. Tommy Lucchese passed away in July of 1967, surrounded by family. He didn't die in a prison cell. He didn't go down in a blaze of gunfire. He died in peace, like a businessman who finished his life's work with precision. At his funeral, the attendance list read like a who's who of power: judges, city officials, businessmen, and mobsters from every borough. It wasn't just a farewell to a mob boss. It was the quiet exit of a man who'd quietly ruled New York. Even after his death, the Lucchese family continued to thrive, for a time, because of the structure Tommy left behind. His systems were so strong that they carried the crew forward without collapse. That was his final act of genius. Most mob bosses are remembered for their crimes, their trials, or their downfalls. Tommy Lucchese is remembered for something else: his consistency. Year after year, he made money, kept peace, and avoided war. That's rare in the Mafia world. He left no memoirs, no interviews, and no headlines screaming his name. But insiders knew. Tommy was the kind of boss who didn't need fame. He had respect, he had power, and he built something that lasted long after he was gone. Tommy Lucchese proved you didn't need chaos to run an empire. You needed structure, trust, discipline, and the patience to let others fight while you collected the real prize. That's why, in the world of organized crime, Lucchese wasn't just a boss, he was the blueprint. Tommy Lucchese's greatest weapon wasn't a gun, it was strategy. He read people, anticipated problems, and stayed 10 steps ahead. Every deal, every handshake, every silence was calculated. He made moves others didn't see until it was too late. While other bosses craved titles like the boss of bosses, Lucchese never needed one. Power didn't need to be announced. His influence was felt in every corner of New York, from the loading docks to the mayor's office. He knew how to make enemies disappear, not through violence, but by turning them irrelevant. If someone crossed him, Tommy wouldn't always send a hit. He'd cut them off from business, from allies, from income, until they faded into nothing. Lucchese didn't trust many people, but those who earned it stayed close for decades. His loyalty ran deep, but it was never blind. Betray him once, and you were gone. Not always dead, just erased like you never mattered. Gravitational rival bosses admitted Tommy never got greedy. He didn't chase every dollar. He chased control. He didn't need to own every racket. He just needed a piece of it, and the power to decide who got the rest. Practicinated FBI agents studying the Mafia still use Lucchese as the benchmark. Not for violence, not for corruption, but for structure. He wasn't loud, he wasn't reckless, but he was dangerous, because everything he did worked. Tommy never let ego ruin his leadership. He didn't need applause, and he didn't chase the spotlight. His focus was always on efficiency, on keeping the machine running, the money flowing, and the peace intact. One of his smartest moves was never rushing retaliation. If someone disrespected the family, Tommy didn't explode in anger. He waited, studied, struck when the moment was right, and only when it would serve a purpose. Not speak often at commission meetings, but when he did, others listened. His words carried weight, not because he was feared, but because he was respected. He didn't waste time. He didn't waste power. And that's what made him dangerous. Unlike many bosses who let their families become chaotic after their death, Lucchese left behind a blueprint. He believed in legacy over control. He didn't try to rule from the grave. He tried to build something that could run without him. Windshield when mob historians talk about the most effective boss, not the most violent or most famous, but the most calculated and consistent, Tommy Lucchese's name comes up every time. He didn't just survive the Mafia, he outsmarted it. Lucchese proved that brains could build an empire, and silence could protect it. And long after others fell, his legacy kept moving, quietly, smoothly, and untouchably. Tommy Lucchese didn't fear law enforcement. He studied it. He knew how investigations worked, how indictments were built, and how to keep his name one layer removed from every operation. That's why the feds never got close. While others bragged about body counts, Lucchese quietly expanded into new industries: airports, sanitation, garment distribution. He didn't need to control the streets. He controlled the infrastructure the city depended on every day. Even when undercover agents began to flood New York, Lucchese's inner circle stayed clean. He trained his capos to operate low-key, avoid open discussions, and stick to face-to-face contact. No recordings, no slips, no mistakes. Excelamadius DRU. He once said to a trusted associate, "If they can't hear you and they can't see you, they can't touch you." That simple rule became the foundation of his survival and the key to the Lucchese family's dominance. Tommy's power wasn't loud. It was layered, built through favors, silence, loyalty, and patience. He knew when to act, when to wait, and when to disappear. And that's why even his enemies respected him. Delayed decades later, law enforcement admitted that out of all the Mafia leaders of his era, Tommy Lucchese gave them the least to work with and did the most damage. That was his genius. That was his legacy. Tommy Lucchese didn't chase war, but he was always ready. If diplomacy failed, if lines were crossed, if loyalty broke, he responded with precision. No show, no warnings, just action, delivered quietly and permanently. He wasn't obsessed with titles or attention. He was obsessed with results. Every move he made was calculated for impact. He didn't react emotionally, he reacted strategically. That's what separated Lucchese from the rest. Even within his own family, he promoted based on merit, not blood. He didn't care where you came from, only what you could do. That earned him respect from his men and loyalty that couldn't be bought. Peacefully of organized crime, survival is rare. But building something that survives you, that's even rarer. Tommy Lucchese didn't just lead. He engineered a system that worked long after he was gone. He wasn't the most feared. He wasn't the most famous. But Tommy Lucchese was the most effective. He turned the Mafia into a machine. And while others broke under pressure, Tommy just kept moving. Tommy Lucchese didn't need violence to prove his power. He didn't need headlines to prove his reach. He built quietly. He ruled efficiently. And he left behind a legacy most bosses could only dream of. This is Mob Truth, formerly Criminal Code. Real stories, no Hollywood, no lies. If you want more like this, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Every episode reveals the minds that move the underworld without ever showing their faces.